Today I'm speaking to Steve Guinan, former teammate, former professional footballer, previously played for Nottingham Forest and Cheltenham, amongst a host of other teams as well. So appreciate you coming on today, Steve. Long time no see. How's things? How's life for you?
All good, thanks. Good to connect again. And yeah, everything's okay in my world. It's, forced our hand the last 12 months with COVID, and like most of the population working from home, and an awful lot. And I don't think that will change to a degree going forward. I still think that's going to be encouraged by the FA to a degree. But yeah, thoroughly looking forward to getting back out on the grass and getting into clubs and going and visiting players, coaches, managers, and all the rest of it.
So what you're up to nowadays? Because obviously we haven't spoke since, I'd probably say going back to 2006, when obviously I was at Hereford when you were there, and we did meet previously, briefly, when I just started my apprenticeship when I was at Nottingham Forest, and you're a few years older than me, so you were kind of, I think you were in and around the first team at that stage. So let everyone know kind of what you're doing now on a day-to-day basis.
So I now work for the FA, and I lead the player to coach strategies. So basically what that means is I have the overall responsibility for the development and delivery of coaching qualifications to transitioning players, really, either current who are being a little bit proactive and thinking about what's next, or those who have retired and are going through them right now. So that's pretty much what my role encompasses. I also lead on an international player to coach program, which specifically targets current and former England senior players to almost accelerate their learning. I think one of the issues from a whole host of research that I and others have undertaken is probably just due to their profile, they will get jobs ahead of others. Whether that's right or wrong is a whole different can of worms, which I'm not going to get into. But I think if that's the case, then let's try and help prepare them as earlier rather than later. So I run a bespoke program for a small number of individuals, as well as overseeing the whole player to coach strategy.
Wow, it's really interesting. It sounds like you've got a lot going on. So I do want to touch on that in a bit more detail a bit later on. But just let us know kind of what is your typical day then?
Oh, there isn't a typical day. That's probably a bit that I like, to be honest. I think, I don't know, most football people that I've come across don't tend to like the same thing, the same experiences. And I know that sounds a little bit contradictory in the fact that we always used to start training at 10:30 and finish at 12:30, and there was organisation and almost a disciplined timetable. But I couldn't work in an office 9 to 5, the same people, the same job, the same experiences every day. That's why I like this job. It's the fact that every day is different. I'm meeting new people all the time. I'm working with different people. I may be at Birmingham City one day, I may be at Man United the next day, I may be at West Ham the next day, I may be at St George's Park the next day. And I enjoy that. I really enjoy the diversity and the variety that the role brings. So I'd love to tell you what an average day is, but I haven't got one, to be honest.
That's really, really interesting. And it's a kind of stark contrast to what I'm doing now, because I am involved in your generic kind of city street 9 to 5. And as we mentioned off air, kind of you're generally on the road every day up and down the motorways, and I'm working from home, and I really do enjoy it. But it's just interesting to hear you say that, obviously, from a player's perspective or a previous player's perspective, you kind of don't want to be doing the same thing every day. And although I am working from home and I've got the choice of whether I want to go in the office, I'm not doing the same thing every day. So I've never really looked at it like that, to be honest. And again, it's quite interesting that you brought it up, to be honest. It sounds like, again, you're doing a lot and you're meeting a lot of different people, and you've got a variety of things that you do on a day-to-day basis, which is really interesting. I mean, talk to me about your retirement process then, and your transition away from playing football. How was that for you?
Yeah, it's a difficult one to describe, but I'll do my best. I always wanted to control my own destiny, and I did, and I was very fortunate. And what I mean by that is, the precarious nature of football, and predominantly where we played, you're on a year-to-year contract, maximum of 2 years. You're fighting to pay your bills from year to year. And I'd been in that situation numerous times when I'd been released, let go from a club in the May, June. I'm fighting to get another club to literally pay the mortgage the next month. And I knew that almost instantaneously, your contract stops. A month later, you don't get paid. And I was so wary of that, and I didn't want that to happen. So I put a number of things in place, through probably the influence of my dad, really, who even from the outset as an apprentice at Forest was like, you've got to do your A-levels, you've got to prepare for something else. And I think, and I've explained this on other podcasts, that the light bulb moment for me was when I was 26. Looking back, I was nowhere near as professional as what I should have done. I mean, granted, there was no real education around nutrition or the right lifestyle, and it was still a heavy drinking culture when I was growing up, absolutely. But what happened was I left Forest, I bounced around the various loan spells. I signed for Plymouth permanently under Kevin Hodges at the time, who was the manager. That was in the July. By October, he'd got the sack. Paul Sturrock came in, and almost within 2 weeks, just had made his mind up I wasn't his type of player. And he pulled me in his office and he said, you'll never play for the club again. I don't want you to turn up at the training ground. Just rot, just see out your contract. We just had I don't know what it was, but that was his decision. And there was nothing I could do about it. I signed a 2-year contract, and for 18 months, I never trained, never played a game. And my contract ended, and that was it. You know what it's like in football, out of sight, out of mind. Clubs are like, well, what have you been doing? And I was like, well, listen, I couldn't play, he wouldn't let me in that. Well, you'll have to come on trial and blah blah blah. And to cut a long story short, no one wanted to touch me. It was Graham Turner that offered me a trial, and typical Graham style, come up for a week, which turned into a 6-week trial, no pay. I wasn't getting paid, but everything had stopped, and I earned myself a 1-year contract in the conference that I'd never played in before. I'd always been in the league, and that was the light bulb, the penny dropping to go, I can't let this happen again. And to almost make matters worse, I just got married that summer.
Oh, wow.
So I was just like, every single year, I'm going to do something. So when that day finally arrives, I've got another vocation, I've got qualifications, whatever it would be, I could go into another job. So from that moment on, I think the following summer, I got in touch with the PFA and started doing my coaching. I did my B license. I wasn't sure coaching was for me at that point, so I was even looking at chiropody courses, going back to university, becoming a physio, school teacher. But the more I got involved in coaching, so it was B license 1 year, B license the following year, then it was A license. And I just tried to get as many strings to my bow as possible. So for when the day finally came, I could possibly get employment. So fast forward a number of years, I was 35 at Nottingham Town, traveling from Worcester to Northampton, 2 hours a day back. I was in and out the side, not really enjoying it. And Hartpury College, and a lot of people on who listen in and watch, you won't have heard of Hartpury College, but they're one of the best college and universities in the country in terms of football. They win England colleges, Great Britain university titles, and we used to train there and use their facilities when I was at Cheltenham. I applied and was offered the job of head of football, which was like overseeing the under 18s, but also looking at the senior team at university. And that was my first full-time coaching role. And I knew that that's what I wanted to do. So quite a bold move. I went to see the manager at Northampton at Christmas. I'd got 6 months left on my contract, and I just said, would you tear it up? It didn't take him even half a second to agree to it, by the way. He just laughed and went, yeah, no problem. And that was it. So I walked away from professional football, and a lot of people who I discussed with it close to me are going, you must be mad, what you do. And I was like, it's not going to last forever. I know that this is what I want to do. And at some point, I've got to take the cut in wages, the difference in finance. I've got to make that step. So literally, I think it was almost Christmas Eve, I think, ripped up my contract. January the 3rd, started a new full-time job at Hartpury, different environment, different culture, and coaching every day. And, I had done a number of things. I think I've definitely got my AA license by then. I've done the LMA course in applied management. I'd also got a degree under my belt then. I'd gone back to university and done a sports science degree. So it wasn't as straightforward as just getting that role. I put a number of aspects in place. So even when I saw job applications go up, I could apply because I'd hit the essential criteria. So that's basically what it was. Yeah, that's how I retired.
Wow. And how did it make you feel? Because obviously you said there you put things in place. Me personally, I didn't. From a mental perspective, I did. I was always prepared to work, knowing that if I didn't earn enough money whilst playing, happy to go and work and find something that was sustainable for me. And luckily, first attempt, I managed to do that. But I didn't put anything in place. So as in paper. So I'm really, really lucky and thankful that I didn't really find that or find myself in that situation where I was kind of in a rut or I didn't experience rejection through going through interviews and things like that. And I know previous people have, and it can be quite daunting and a bit kind of bit downhearting for the individual as well. So for you then, obviously you put things in place and it's come to fruition. And then when you finally got offered that job outside of football, how did you feel? Because I know for me, I was really, really relieved. Not that it wasn't relief out of the fact that, oh, I've actually got a job. It was relief that, okay, well, I've left football. I've done kind of something that I've wanted to do. And everyone kind of really wants to be a footballer as a child. And then now I'm going into something that's sustainable, pretty respectable as well, that being property. So from that perspective, it was like a big sigh of relief for me. I've kind of done one thing and now I'm moving on to the next. So how did it feel for you?
A little bit uncomfortable, I think, to begin with. You know, it was totally different environment. I was aware, and it did help me in hindsight, that because I was in a college and university environment, the standard of my vocabulary, language that I used, even as simple as sending emails, they had to, you know, absolutely had to be spot on, because it'd come back to me and say, this is not, you know, a forward-facing university. You can't send that email out and it can't be composed like that because it doesn't meet the criteria and the standards we expect. And you know, there's certain things now that I learned back then which was really uncomfortable, but it was fantastic, really. You know, I give a lot of credit to my sort of boss at the time, Tom Radcliffe at Hartpury College, who possibly I didn't give enough praise to, because I think he knew that I was in the early stages of transition, and he was more, you know, about dangling the carrot than beating the stick. He was like, come on, you can do this. And it wasn't necessarily anything to do with my football ability, knowledge or nous or anything like that. It was just scheduling, organising days. You know, you've got to plan this in 3 weeks' time. And it was just some of the things that I was coming to grips with, that as a football player, everything was taken care of you. You never even have to give it a thought, apart from, right, the whistle's blown, get out and train. There's your lunch after. We'll see you tomorrow, and perform on a Saturday. So there's a lot of other things that you had to think about. But yeah, a little bit uncomfortable, daunting, but I was ready, to be honest. I was a bit the same as you. I'd accepted the fact that football wasn't going to go on forever. And I think perhaps socially and psychologically, I needed a different test. I needed a different challenge. I knew, and that I was, you know, called, you know, the jokes in the dressing room, the granddad, look at the old git in the corner and blah, blah, blah. The young lads and me were, you know, Christ, I can remember some of the music that was going on in dressing rooms. And, you know, I was going, what's going on here? I just can't listen to this. And I knew I was ready for that next stage. So I was almost embracing it, to be honest.
Yeah. Wow, that's amazing. And then, so you've obviously gone from playing football, had a sustainable career, amazing, done what you needed to do on the pitch, and then you've been given the opportunity completely left field, outside of the football world. So what transferable skills do you think that you've taken from football, or ones that you may have been kind of innate with anyway, from football or within your own psyche into that first kind of opportunity, and also what you're doing now as well?
It's a good question. I think, you know, definitely the team element, you know, being a team player and canvassing, being a bit of a democrat, trying to get other people's opinions and thoughts. I think the passion, without a shadow of a doubt, you know, trying to articulate that to other people. Hard work, not afraid to work unsociable hours. And I think that was something people that probably surprised some of the people at Hartpury at the time, because they were like, oh, you'll just want to work 10 till 2, they're all the hours you work to. And I can remember my first week, I think even then it was my hardest week. It was a week of death, where we had a lad playing for England under 18 schools in Llandudno. So I had to drive up, watch the game, bring it back to the college, got back at like 3 a.m. I then had a game the next day, which I think was somewhere like Swansea. So I had to drive, get on the coach, go to Swansea, take the team, come back. And I was all over the place. And I think people thought it was almost like, well, we'll test him in the first week, see how he gets on. But,
yeah,
I think some of those early years in football, which you'd have experienced, of when the old-fashioned managers would almost push you to breaking point and you've got to go again. And I had no issues with it. Wasn't afraid for hard work, almost looking forward to it, still thriving and enthusiastic about the opportunity. And I think there's a number of transferable skills that athletes and sports people have in general, but find it difficult to actually write them down and articulate them. But they were probably some of mine: passionate, not afraid of hard work, team player, willing to work with others. I'm disciplined. I had no problem. I'm even now. I'm a very conscientious learner. If it means I have to work through the night and beyond, then I've got no issues with that. So I think they were probably some of mine.
Brilliant. And then, so when you're going through that kind of initial transition, call it kind of retirement thought process, putting things in motion, when it came to kind of hanging up your boots, did you get any help at all? Did you draw on anyone, whether it be family members or maybe the PFA or other organisations for help?
The PFA have always been there in terms of support and providing funding for various courses that I did, and I'd be eternally grateful for that. I think the wider game in general at the moment probably doesn't do enough, and I think that's probably reflected in a lot of the issues we're seeing over the last few years in terms of mental health. And I call the wider game because unfairly, the PFA do get a lot of stick about they need to do more. I personally think they need to do more, but so do the FA, so do the Premier League, so do the LMA, so do the EFL. A number of stakeholders should come together to make it better, because it's almost as if, and this was the same in coaching and preparing people for that secondary career after football. Well, it's almost a case of waiting for players to come to them, and players, I'm seeing it now. They've had everything done for them, and at the top level, they've got agents and player care officers and people at the clubs who will literally go around to the house and change the light bulb for them because they don't know how to do it. They don't need how to organise the finances. They need to change the tyre. What do they do? People will find them schools. They'll take their other halves and partners to the best shops, and it's like, come on, and there's a sense of me that understands it because they are commodities worth hundreds of millions. I get it, but it's not preparing them for a life after football. And as much as you may be set for life financially, which obviously a large percentage of those people aren't, it's only the fractions in the Premier League that are. There's a number of people that are going to have to work again, and even if they don't have to work financially, they need to have motivation to get out of bed every day. You can't just go on the golf course or sunbathe, or you need to find a driver, an internal passion that's going to bring you alive. And I think you mentioned it before. It's what's your identity? What are you known as? You're not Danny the footballer, you're Danny the person, and it's just the job that you got affiliated and to, that you're a professional footballer. That's not the case. So I think there's definitely room for the stakeholders to do more and almost be more proactive about encouraging players to plan for what's next.
Definitely. I mean, there's many things there that I kind of resonate with in terms of not personal experience, but just things that I've seen, read about, kind of listened to and spoken to various kind of athletes and other people outside of sport as well. And definitely more needs to be done from all the stakeholders involved. They've got enough money, they've got enough time, they've got enough staff members to do that. Not going to be easy. No one's really got any answers, and that's the hard thing. But also from a family perspective, the individual as well, the sports person, they need to do more. You mentioned there like basic life skills, and you're correct in what you're saying. Obviously, the high profile ones, they are commodities. The clubs don't want them climbing up ladders to go and fix light bulbs and things. So you can understand from that perspective, but you still need an element of understanding going forward and just basic life skills. It's just one thing that frustrates me so much is when I hear athletes say that when they retired, then they lost their identity. It's so frustrating because you're still John Smith, but you kind of you're the athlete second and the person first. That's the way I always address myself when I was playing. It's up to other people in terms of how they perceive you. You can only do so much. If they see you as a footballer or a tennis player first, then that's fine. But from your own perspective, you need to understand that there's a difference. And I always believe if you are of that kind of way of thinking with regards to you first, athlete second, it will help you when it comes to transitioning away from sport to another career. Because as you know, I mean, me and you, we retired of our own accord. But as you know, it can happen overnight. You can get a bad injury and then what? So again, it's very easy to sit here and say, look, you should do this and that. There's no right or wrong when it comes to kind of retirement. And that's something I always try and stress. But just try and put as many things in place, whether it be mentally, physically, on paper, whatever, in order to make the transition a little bit easier. So yeah, I kind of understand where you're coming from with the points you made there. In terms of retirement in general, so across the board now, not just football, sport, I'm talking about kind of all sports. Do you think retirement needs to be approached in a different way?
Well, in the short answer, yes. It's not. If I feel at the moment, and I do think this, that it's not, it could be better. Then yeah, there's definitely modifications and changes should be made across every sport. I think one of the interesting things when I started the role with the FA, I was really fortunate in the first couple of months. I went and researched a number of different sports, a number of different athletes, and I spoke to cricketers, athletes, rugby players, golfers, footballers, everyone who was, on courses, thinking about doing a course, retiring, transitioned in leadership roles. And they pretty much all reflected upon it. And they said, there's not enough done. And, it was interesting to know, well, athletes think this, that their national governing body do X, cricketers think this about theirs. But when you try and, put all that and filter it all and try and make sense out of it, there's a lot of crossover and similarities. And I think, the way you tried to describe it then, it's never too late. And we say that all the time. It's never too late to start planning. And we'd give everyone a pat on the back and credit, saying, great, you're ready. You picked up the phone, you've dropped an email, whatever it is, that's the start of the process. Brilliant. But there's a whole host of footballers that don't want to pick up the phone. That with all due respect, can't really send an email. It may be a one-liner, and which is fine. It's the start of the process, but it's almost as if we have to do more. And we have to get in front of them on more occasions through various platforms, through different people, and constantly drip feed that message in from live case studies, real case studies. Well, I retired at this age. I retired through injury. I retired through X, Y, Z. This is what I did. These are the problems I faced. And we constantly have to, in my opinion, be banging the drum through the collective across sport. So they'll hear it so often, they'll ultimately be forced into doing something earlier, because at the moment, I'll repeat it myself, it's never too late, but it is. You can't get, and the way I try to use an analogy is, and I'm talking very selfishly here about the world that I operate in. If you were to get a real serious illness and you needed an operation, you wouldn't let someone unqualified operate on you. You wouldn't want to go to the best in the business. Yeah. And that's almost the same. It's like you have to possess qualifications in most walks of life. Yeah. So if that's the case, you're not going to get that overnight. So the sooner you get those in place, the better.
Yeah, definitely. And it's a tough one, because when I stopped playing, obviously you're earning half decent money. I was never on big money and things like that. But when I got my first initial job, and I was grateful for it, the salary I was earning was a third, if not less, than what I was used to earning. So a lot of things changed within the household, and you have to make cutbacks. And I was just willing to take the opportunity based on the fact that my foot was now in the door. And I knew, me being me, I'm looking to progress. And the company I was the company I was working for then, they were in a position where they offered progression within the company. So for me, it was like, I'll take the initial hit for a year or two and then just build up from there. So a lot of these people now in sport, I still hear the stories now where people are like, well, I don't want to take that wage cut, or have you heard what they're offering here? It's peanuts. It's like, you're never going to leave football unless you're kind of the Gary Nevilles and Carragers of this world and higher echelons of sport. You're not going to be given an opportunity just because of your status. And if you are, you're not really going to be on top wages. You've got people who have been they've left school and kind of made it through the ranks within whatever your chosen field is after sport, in these organisations, and they've reached that particular level. So for you to then just come into it, a newbie, to be given an opportunity and expect to get those high wages, it's never really going to happen. So that's another sacrifice that potentially athletes need to be aware of. And are you willing to take that drop in wage and things like that? So a lot of it's pride as well, because as you know, sometimes when you're playing football, you have a particular lifestyle that you want to keep, which is completely fine, but you may need to obviously rein that in a little bit. Depends on who you are as a person, really. But yeah, I mean, do you miss playing at all, or?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I think that will never leave, will it? That sort of buzz and the fun of being involved in it in the dressing room. The adrenaline of trying to get 3 points on a Saturday. You've played bad, you've played good, you've been given some stick off the fans, the elation of scoring a goal. I think all of that stuff you look back really fondly. I think I'm definitely very fortunate in the fact that I stayed in the game, and I don't miss the game, and that sounds again quite contradictory. I think because if I'd have gone into another field, if I'd have gone into your field or gone into accounting or became a plumber or whatever, I think I'd be desperate to be involved in football. I'd be at a game every Saturday, I'd watch it on the telly. But because I'm still immersed in it and see clubs and players and coaches operating on a daily basis, I feel as though now I actually don't mind the breaks. You know, at weekends, you know, my lad's a scholar actually at Cheltenham Town. My daughter plays football. I still get football fixed with them, but I can switch off. You know, if there's a game on TV, I can quite happily just let the missus watch whatever rubbish she wants to watch on TV, and the kids can put what they want on. That's my time to switch off. So, but I think, I don't think you'll ever, you know, stop thinking about the game. You know, we were both one of the lucky few from, you know, millions of people that probably want to be footballers when they're younger. So to have done it to whatever level, I think, it's amazing looking back. Absolutely.
Definitely. Yeah, I mean, I think I'm a bit of a weird one then, because I don't miss it at all. Obviously, people talk about, like you said, the banter in the dressing room and the fans cheering your name or getting on your back, and that just initial kind of adrenaline. And that's never going to be replicated anywhere, really. But I don't miss playing at all. I don't know why that is. It doesn't mean to say I hated the game. I absolutely loved it and I put all my heart and effort into it when I was involved. But I don't miss it at all. So I don't know. It's just one of those situations, really. Everyone's different, aren't they?
Yeah, absolutely. And there's other people I know that feel the same. They're like, do you know what? I genuinely don't. And it's a weird one. I think I'm definitely a glass half full person. I look back and I think, you know, even the horrendous time at Plymouth that me and my wife had for 18 months, 2 years, there were still positives to come out of it. But it's difficult because I think, and you'll know as well as me, there's probably more bad times in football than there are actually good. And the lower you go down the leagues, there's definitely more bad times because it's not ran the same as the top teams in the top league. So a lot of people I know were desperate to get out of it because of some of the things that they'd face and have to go through. And I think, you know, football has changed for the better. But I totally understand your
100%. And you've probably heard the old kind of the adage where people say, stay in the game as long as you can. That's all well and good when you're in the Championship or the Premier League. But as you said there, when you're getting kind of changed in porta cabins every day and cold showers and sometimes there's no food, and it's a completely different kettle of fish when you kind of lower down the pyramid, like League One, League Two, obviously Conference as well. So it's hard to explain from the outside looking in. Everyone's got a perception of what it is, but until you actually explain, it's kind of, I've seen people actually physically, when I'm explaining certain scenarios, that their mouths drop because they just don't realize that those things would happen in football, especially professional football. So we've obviously experienced all of that. Obviously, I mentioned earlier we kind of first met each other when I was at Forest as an apprentice, and I think you were kind of in and around the first team reserves at that time. So talk to me about your Forest debut. How was that for you?
Brilliant, but again bizarre looking back. I mean, my debut was Well, probably a little bit of context behind. So I'd been involved in quite a few first team squads, home and away, travel down with the team in the hotel on a Friday night, never made the bench. And I think in the early couple of occasions, I think my dad would have come down and watched on the hopeful, that I'd make the bench, and I never did. And then we travelled down, and my debut was against Wimbledon away. And again, no point coming, probably not going to be sub. And then I can remember going to the pre-match meeting, which would have been, roughly sort of midday, half an hour from the ground. And Frank Clark was a manager at the time, and the old flip chart paper and board, and it was flipped down at the start, so you couldn't see it, and he just flipped over it and turned the first page, and my name was starting up front, written in pen, and it was like, didn't see that coming. Even to the so couldn't. No one was there to watch. It was against Wimbledon of all teams in the Premier League, which was Vinnie Jones, Dean Holdsworth, Effany Koku.
Yeah,
it was a tough debut, and we lost the game 1-0, unfortunately. But yeah, brilliant. In that team back then, Brian Roy. I think it was me, Brian Roy, and Jason Lee up front. Stuart Pearce, Colin Cooper, Scott Gemmell. I think Steve Stone. It was a fantastic Forest team, and I think whatever you say, I only made a handful of appearances in the Premier League, but you can never take that away from me, and that's something I'm extremely proud of. So yeah, great day. Loved every moment of it.
Amazing. And then obviously, I've been in a situation before where you've kind of been in and around the first team, get your opportunity, and then you end up kind of dropping down the league. So how was that for you? Again, you've gone from Forest, massive club, kind of world-renowned reputation. You mentioned some top players there that you play with, and then again you've dropped down the leagues and different kind of playing style, different facilities, potentially different salary as well, and different locations. So how was all of that kind of rolled into one situation? How was that for you?
Good and bad, to be honest. I'd always fight my corner at Forest and think, did I have a fair crack of the whip? I'd probably say no. I can remember that on the one occasion where Forest were a little bit like the West Brom, the Norwich of teams of that ilk now, where they're a bit of a yo-yo team between Premier League and Championship. So a manager would get sacked, new manager would come in, you'd have to, I've got to showcase what I've got to the new manager, improve myself again. And I did it a number of times. And I think even with Dave Bassett, the year we got promoted to the Premier League, I was involved in almost every squad, was sub a number of occasions, only got on a couple of times. But after we got promoted, and that was the season with Pierre van Hooijdonk, Harry pulled me in the office and said, listen, you've been brilliant all year. Here's a new 2-year contract. I was like, great. He was like, you're in my thoughts now for the Premier League. You're sort of number 3, 4 striker. I was like, great, I'll set that. I was still relatively young. And then he rang me 10 days later and said, which was a massive amount at the time, said, we've just been given 20 million. I'm going to go out and sign 3 strikers. So you're now number 7. He went, you can go. And I've just signed a 2-year deal. And, there's a number of incidents like that. And it does deflate you. It does make you feel pretty low. And you sort of get forced out. It's not a case of, do you fancy going here? It's like, you go in here. I had some good loan spells and some spells, permanent transfers. And I look back and I think it's all part of a learning curve. But again, I'd like to think football's more professionalised nowadays. Managers, which you'll know as well, quite often will tell you one thing and quite obviously do the next thing once they've got you through the door. And a number of different things where I've always thought, my wife's always said, you should write a book on some of the things that we've faced and we've seen, and maybe one day I will, but it's a real eye-opener when you fall through the leagues. But I always wanted to be a footballer and played for 15 different clubs and, played for a long time. So I'm fortunate from that respect. But you're right, when you go down through the leagues and you see different things and the way that players are manhandled, spoken to, I don't think there'd be any other industry in the world that you could get away with the things you do in football.
No chance. And that's one thing that I say kind of, I've always been saying it since I retired, and again, working in the office and to doing what I'm doing now. Because I can speak to anyone. I don't care if it's someone homeless or CEO of a major kind of company. I treat everyone the same. So I think that's not only from my upbringing, but also from the environment of football. Because there was times when I was negotiating the deal with, say, Martin O'Neill at the age of like 18, 19. So I'm face to face with him. We're negotiating on a level. So for me now to speak to, I don't know, someone who's a property investor or developer or CEO of the company that I'm working for, it's just a normal person to me. Whereas sometimes I see other people who I work with and they're a bit maybe shy or kind of in a situation where they're kind of in awe of that person, or maybe just a bit nervous around them. It's just like, it's just the environment of being in football. You speak to and see so many different people at so many different levels. You just be accustomed to, or you become accustomed to speaking to different people. So it's just one of those. And again, you kind of mentioned a few things there that, again, I resonate with. You mentioned earlier you're working for the FA. So obviously the FA, a massive institution, have been for many, many years and will be going forward as well. So how is that for you, kind of knowing that you're working for the FA and kind of being involved in that particular organisation?
Do you know what? It's been a strange period, because I actually was a talent reporter, which basically is a scout. So even when I was working with the PFA, I did some scouting for national teams for a number of years. So I was employed by them. But when I started properly in this role, January of last year, within 3 months we were in lockdown. So I don't actually feel as though I've really had a true reflection of the nature of the role and the national governing body. And, you know, I think, as with any national governing body and an organisation of that scale, they do some absolutely brilliant things. I'm really proud to work for them. I think that was really came to light post European Championships. You know, getting to the final. I was fortunate to be at the final. You know, on the back of all the euphoria in England and Gareth and the way he's changed and developed the team and the way he talks and embraces the media and handles himself, I think it was absolutely amazing. You know, as with any other organisation, there's that big that there's areas that can be improved, no doubt. But at the moment, it's a really exciting time. You know, proud to be working for the FA, proud to be, you know, doing what I'm actually doing within the game and trying to make an impact upon those transitioning coaches and managers.
Amazing stuff. Obviously, appreciate you coming on. Really enjoyed the chat. Just before we go, just want to ask, like, have you got any advice that you'd give to any athletes, whether it be young, old, or ones that are approaching the end of their career, whatever it may be? Have you got any advice that you'd give to them when it comes to kind of preparing for life after sport, transitioning from sport to another career?
Probably the only additional aspect I'd say, on top of what we've already discussed, is around preparation. It's almost like, how do you get that extra experience? And, you know, I talk to a number of coaches that have mentioned, and, you know, when job roles come up, and I went through this myself, and when I was applying for jobs, sitting on the other side of the table now and actually being on you know, selection panels and interview panels, before you even get to that stage, why is your name going to make it to the shortlist? So when there's 100 applications come through for a role, why are you going to be the difference? Because yes, you may have been a professional sportsman within your own particular field, but you could have 5 or 10 sportsmen apply for that role. So what is going to be the differentiator from you? And I think, as qualified as people may be, all 7 out of the 10 may have the qualifications. So, okay, we've got rid of 3, now there's another 7. So it's almost like, what's next? And I think a big missing link is the experience. And I think what I tried to do was try and gain that. So I can remember in my spell at Hereford, when you were there, I'd passed my A licence. The year I finished the LMA's diploma in football management, I went in to see Graham, and I said, right, you know, I've got my A licence, because I told him it was 2 weeks across the summer. I've just done the diploma. Can I take the reserves? And typical Graham, you know, a bit like you with your glasses, he moved his glasses down. He went, what do you want from that? What do you want to do that for? And I was like, I just want it for the experience. He went, you know, how much is that going to cost me, Steve? And I was like, you know, nothing. I don't want paying for it. I just want to do it. Well, I'm enthusiastic. And that, to like Graham, was like, euphoria. He was like, so you want to take on more work, run the reserves, but you don't want any more paying? And I went, yeah. And he was like, great, no problem. And you know, that some of those times were, you know, they weren't difficult, but traditional football world, day off on the Wednesday, right? There was no day off for me because I'd have to take the reserves, even though there weren't in a proper reserve league. It was sporadically the friendlies that were arranged. Well, Stevie, yeah, I'll drive the minibus or go wherever it is. And I did that at a number of different clubs where, can I take the 18s after training on a Friday? Can I take the forwards for more shooting? So it added, it padded out my CV. I could actually say without lying, well, actually, I've coached Northampton Town under 18s, I've coached Hereford Reserves, I've coached Cheltenham Town's professionals. So at least I was in a position where, well, okay, well, these two people have got the same qualifications, but this person's got more experience, volunteered his time and done a little bit more. So I think that's probably the only extra little bit of advice I could give. It's like, well, how are you going to make the difference between you and another person of the same ilk?
Brilliant, mate. Brilliant. Great insight. Look, the chat, if you want to just let everyone know where we can find you on social media.
Yeah, I am on Twitter and Instagram, and quite simply, it's @Gins1.
Okay, awesome. Like I said, really appreciate you coming on today. Keep up the good work. I'll be keeping an eye out with regards to what you're doing going forward. And hopefully speak soon. Thanks for coming on.
Yeah. Thanks, Danny. No problem.
Thanks, mate. See you soon.
Thanks. See you, mate.
Bye.